Hello and welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong Week in Review. This show was recorded on Monday, April 25, 2022. I'm Asbed Bedrossian, and Hovik Manucharyan is here as well. We took last weekend off to give everyone the time to celebrate Easter, but Armenian politics never sleeps, so now we have a full slate of topics to discuss. If we have enough time, we'll talk about April 24, never forget, Pashinyan, Aliyev in Brussels, Pashinyan in Moscow. To talk about these issues, we have with us Benyamin Poghosyan, who is the chairman of the Yerevan-based think tank Center for Political and Economic Strategic Studies. Hello, Benyamin. Thanks for joining us. How are you?
Thank you, Ahmed. I'm fine.
Hi, Benjamin.
Hi, Hovik, and thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Okay, this year is the 107th anniversary of the Armenian genocide. The traditional events, both in the diaspora and Armenia, were held to commemorate this event. Hovik, you are in Yerevan now. What can you tell us about this year's commemoration events?
Hello, everyone, and glad to be back after a week's rest. So the Armenian genocide commemoration, just like every year, I think there was sort of two main events in Armenia. One is on the eve of the April 24th. There is a torchlight procession. Normally, it's a 200-300 person engagement with organized by the Armenian Youth Federation and the ARF, and they essentially march towards the Zernagabert Memorial. This year, this was slightly politicized, but given the obvious, political background in which this is happening with normalization talks and tension in Artsakh and so forth. So this year, the events were the torchlight procession was pretty large. And I was there, it was about maybe 5,000 people, and it was very well organized. I did not attend the April 24th events myself, but the April 24th events are more low-key and almost like a solemn procession towards the genocide memorial. What is also noteworthy is that in Stepanakert, there was also a torchlight procession. I think it was larger than normal. Mm-hmm. From the aerial photography that I saw, it was, probably also like at least 1,000 people. So I think that there's a tinge of like uneasiness in the atmosphere in terms of what's going on in Artsakh. This year, the issue of Artsakh was very much integrated as April 24th messaging, in that especially like the Armenian opposition sees the potential, the messaging from Nikol Pashinyan as potentially ceding Artsakh to Azerbaijan, which will result in genocide and ethnic cleansing of Armenians. So those are the events in Armenia.
I was, of course, in Los Angeles at the time.
Yeah.
I didn't go to any specific events this year, but I was watching remotely for a lot of sites. There were huge events in Beirut, Aleppo, Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego, Washington, New York, and Toronto, Uruguay. You want to talk about Uruguay and Argentina.
Yeah, we should.
I can tell you that these demonstrations and demands for justice are continuing in the diaspora unabated by whatever that the Armenian government has said or done in the past year to 2 years. The diaspora remains vigilant and on the issue.
Yeah.
Did you see some of the videos coming out of Uruguay?
Well, I think that's worth mentioning, right? It was shared pretty widely on social media. The Uruguay Armenian community protested, I guess, in front of the Turkish consulate there. And Çavuşoğlu was visiting, and just as a sign of goodwill, he flipped, what do you call it? What is it? The gray wolf sign, which is, it's basically, doing the Nazi salute to a bunch of Jews, and he can sort of get away with it. I believe the Uruguay Foreign Ministry summoned the ambassador, but I don't know what they said. Nothing public came out of that. But yeah, that's just another message of the era of long-term peace in the region, when the party that genocided you is able to do that pretty openly. And we're still in discussions with them.
As far as I know, regarding this Uruguay incident, even Uruguay president made a short statement that he regrets about is the behavior of Turkish foreign minister or the sign which Turkish foreign minister showed. So there was some reaction from Uruguay president itself, very mild one, but in any case, there was a reaction. But here the key thing is that behavior of Turkish foreign minister shows us the perception among Turkish leadership. that they believe that in 2020 they defeated and humiliated Armenia, and now they are speaking with Armenia from the position not only of the strengths, but from the position of a state who not only defeated but really humiliated Armenia.
Yeah.
This is my understanding that the behavior shows that okay, you have been defeated, you have been humiliated, and we can behave as however we like to behave, and we are pretty sure that we will receive no reaction from Armenian government, or at least no tangible reaction, because yes, there was some statement in parliament by, I believe, by chairman of Foreign Relations Committee that Armenia regrets about this sign. But from Turkish perspective, currently they believe Armenian-Turkey relations as a relations between winner and loser.
Just to exclude the possibility that this was an off-the-cuff reaction by Çavuşoğlu, the chief negotiator with Armenia, Serdar Kılıç, put out a tweet saying that the past noble, quoting, noble Turkish nation cannot be tainted with genocide if efforts to rewrite the history were put aside, and so forth and so forth. So basically blatant genocide denial on April 24th. The Turkish military, the official Twitter account of the Turkish military, accused Armenians of genociding Turks. And, we always see random Turks, celebrating Talat Pasha and Enver Pasha. So that's nothing new. But, the top level government messaging from all levels of the Turkish government is not very heartwarming.
And we saw some Turkish demonstrations which were actually celebrating April 24th in the US.
Yes, and today in the PASE, Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe session on April 25, when our delegates also mentioned this behavior of Mr. Çavuşoğlu as unacceptable, I believe representative of Turkey made a speech that, okay, this sign is nothing to do with nationalism or etc. This is a normal sign which normal people are showing when they are seeing each other and some other strange stuff.
But obviously that's not true. Actually, I was thinking of inviting someone to speak about the origins of that sign. And as far as I know, that sign was invented during the 1960s when some of the most brutal anti-communist massacres were occurring in Turkey. And it was very strongly associated with Turkish nationalists and Nazis at that time. So Benjamin, let me ask you about the Armenian government. So ever since 2018, the opposition has been criticizing the Pashinyan government on being too weak and conciliatory on the Armenian genocide. In 2019, for instance, they bring up the issue when the motto for the Armenian Genocide Institute in Tsarnakabert was proposed to be changed from I remember to and demand to just I remember. Essentially, they were claiming it was to de-emphasize the Armenian cause in terms of, demanding reparations and demanding justice, and just settling with remembrance. And that didn't succeed but it was followed by a very loud controversy. What can you tell us about the official policy of the Armenian government as you have observed it in terms of in relation to the Armenian genocide? We also heard some rumors with the museum this year and this April 24th, where I guess the Pashinyan government did not want to attend the genocide museum, but there was some internal controversy and plans were changed. And we saw some photo ops, obviously, of Pashinyan touring the museum. What can you tell us about that?
Okay, regarding the change of motto of Armenian Genocide Institute from I remember and demand into only I remember, as far as I know, this was not part of government pressure or government or any other conspiracy. This was a result of some internal academic debate, which maybe took place not in the right way, not in the right time, not in the right place. And then this also was used by some even interpersonal controversies. And we all know that usually academicians, especially in Armenia, they don't like each other and they are ready to use every possibilities to attack each other. But if we are trying to understand the government strategy or government position, I cannot say that government has any clear position on Armenian genocide during its 2 years of when it was in power, because after 1 year the COVID started, then war. But after 2020 war, when the government started to speak about necessity to normalize relations with Turkey, My understanding is that government seeks to avoid the issue of genocide as much as possible. For example, in September 2021, when Prime Minister had a speech in UN General Assembly, this was, I believe, the first Armenian leader speech in UN General Assembly when there was no mentioning of genocide. There was no mentioning a word of genocide. And also, Prime Minister Pashinyan didn't mention a word about Turkey's direct involvement in 2020 war. So my understanding is that the current government believes that Armenia needs to normalize relations with Turkey. Current government believes that any attempt or any active policy toward genocide recognition by government may hinder this process or may anger Turkey. That is why they are trying to be very careful. If you look at the program of Civic Contract Party, which was published just before the 2021 June early parliamentary elections, the program based on which the party participated in elections, there were, of course, mentioning of Armenian genocide, but even this mentioning was a little bit strange because they said that they believe that the international recognition of Armenian genocide should facilitate and support the regional peace and stability. It's very difficult to understand what does it mean. But in any case, my understanding is that current Armenian government wants to be very careful with Armenian genocide because they believe that any active mentioning or any activities toward Armenian genocide may hinder Armenia-Turkey normalization process or may anger Turkish counterparts. At least this is my perception.
Isn't that already like satisfying Turkish preconditions?
If you speak about Turkish preconditions, let's be very clear. I'm not sure what our current government thinks or pretend to think, but I know what Turkey thinks. Turkey has very clear understanding that as he put preconditions on Armenia back in 2009, 2010, when Turkey stopped the football diplomacy. And one of the key preconditions was to give up Nagorno-Karabakh. And in Turkey, government strongly believes that Armenian government realized this precondition and the Armenian government gave up on Karabakh. So from Turkish perspective, Armenia realized at least one precondition. Second precondition regarding the international recognition of Armenian genocide. First, Turkey understands that currently this is not priority for Armenian government. And second, as far as I understand, for Turkey, this is not as much a strong issue as it was before 2015. Because before 2015, there was a perception in Turkey that this 100th anniversary of Armenian genocide is going to be something terrible for Turkey, and they did everything somehow to avoid any ramifications. But 2015 came, and then 2015 passed, and Turkey saw that nothing terrible happened with them. So from Turkish perspective, the Armenian genocide is not as significant precondition now as it was, for example, in 2008, 2009. So here we should accept that not only Armenian government somehow satisfied this Turkish precondition on international recognition of Armenian genocide, but international recognition of Armenian genocide itself is now much less important for Turkey than it was during football diplomacy.
Right.
For them, the two key preconditions are to give up on Artsakh, to recognize Artsakh as part of Azerbaijan, and to once more officially recognize the current Turkey-Armenia border, which was finally fixed by Kars Treaty of October 2021. So from Turkish perspective, Armenian government realized the first precondition. Armenian government gave up on Artsakh, and that is why they started this negotiation process. So from Turkish perspective, and this is quite logical, okay, we say Armenia, you should do A, B, C if you want to restart the normalization process. Armenian government did, if not A, B, C, at least A and B. So now we start the normalization process. So this is how the process has been viewed from Turkey. And unfortunately for us, I have to accept that this perception is quite close to reality.
And we also heard during the election campaigning last year, this messaging about, the more we hate our neighbors, the more they hate us, and we should be the first ones to start loving our neighbors. I also wanted to mention one thing, which I think I want to correct sort of a little bit what I said. Yes, the April 23rd Torchlight Vigil, given that it's organized by the ARF, was a little bit politicized, but also I want to give credit to the Armenian opposition because they also this week, we'll talk about this, they started the protests in earnest against Pashinyan's sort of policy on Artsakh, and they deliberately waited until April 25 when they could have easily capitalized on the crowds that gathered on April 24th and April 23rd to press the gas on that issue as well. And we also have to remember, obviously, 4 years ago, during this same exact time when Nikol Pashinyan came to power, and he actually sort of used the threat of capitalizing the people on April 23rd
making a
and
mess
April
of April 24.
Yeah, and which led to Sir Sargsyan's resignation on the eve of April 24th, on April 23rd. And also it led for the first time, I think, for the ARF that year to change the format of its torchlight procession. I forget what the details were, but I believe there was a change in that. So from a political angle, these nuances are important.
Okay, let's move forward. On April 6th, Pashinyan and Aliyev met in Brussels under the auspices of European Council President Charles Michel. Aliyev wouldn't have gone there unless Pashinyan's proposals were acceptable to him, although we continue to see differences in their views. For example, about quote-unquote corridors through Armenia without any Armenian customs and control. Benyamin, can you say what the results of those discussions were in Brussels? It's been 3 weeks now.
My understanding is this, that during the meeting, the EU, and probably in coordination with United States, put forward its ideas how peace should be reached between Armenia and Azerbaijan, or how peace can be reached between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So from Western perspective, they have clear sequence of steps to reach peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Step number 1, Armenia should officially state and accept that it agrees that Karabakh should be part of Azerbaijan with some autonomy. The second step, the West will try to convince Mr. Aliyev also to say that, okay, Azerbaijan is ready as a gesture of goodwill to grant some sort of autonomy to Karabakh without any details of what this autonomy could be. All these details should be part of further negotiations. And third, after both Armenia and Azerbaijan agrees that Karabakh should be part of Azerbaijan with some sort of autonomy, then a peace treaty should be signed between Armenia and Azerbaijan as soon as possible, which will allow the West to raise the issue of withdrawal of Russian peacekeepers from Nagorno-Karabakh, which is in the strategic interest of the West, because especially after February 24, the unified or collective West, United States plus European Union, has a clear strategy of Russian containment and deterrence, and it has a clear strategy to weaken as much as possible Russian influence in the post-Soviet space, including in the South Caucasus. And the withdrawal of Russian peacekeepers from Nagorno-Karabakh is perceived in the West as an important step towards the weakening of Russian influence in the South Caucasus. So from a West perspective, to be able to demand the withdrawal of Russian peacekeepers, they need peace treaty between Armenia and Azerbaijan to tell Russia that, okay, guys, conflict is over. Yes, we thank you. We thank the Russian peacekeepers for their service, that they came and they prevented another war after November 2020. But now Armenia and Azerbaijan are in peace. They agree on the status of Nagorno-Karabakh as some sort of autonomy within Azerbaijan. So there is no threat of new war, and there is no need of your services. I mean, services of Russian peacekeepers.
So, Benjamin, do you think that's the end game for the West to remove Russian forces from South Caucasus?
Definitely, yes. The end game is to remove Russian forces from South Caucasus. First, they would like to start from Nagorno-Karabakh, and if they succeed and no Russian peacekeepers are in Nagorno-Karabakh, I believe that they will immediately focus all their efforts to Armenia, trying to also push out 102nd Russian military base from Gyumri.
So, of course, the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has accused the EU of inserting itself in the peace process between Armenia and Azerbaijan in order to steal the credit for any potential peace deal. They've even signaled a possible parallel thread of Armenia-Azerbaijan negotiations. In Moscow, a few days ago, Pashinyan reaffirmed Moscow's quote-unquote key role in the ongoing negotiations between Armenia and Azerbaijan. What is Pashinyan hearing in Moscow?
Okay, of course, the right person, or maybe the only person who can answer this by 100% confidence is either Mr. Pashinyan or Mr. Putin, but we may try to have our perception on this. So let's understand the Russian position. From my perspective, the Russian strategic goal is to have a permanent military presence in Nagorno-Karabakh. permanent military presence in Nagorno-Karabakh.
In addition to Gyumri.
Yes, in addition to Gyumri. And
Okay.
Russia understands that for having permanent military presence in Nagorno-Karabakh, they should have Armenian population in Nagorno-Karabakh. Does it mean minimum 100,000 Armenians as we have now? Or does it mean maybe 50,000 Armenians? I'm not sure. But definitely, Russia wants to have permanent military presence. And Russia understands that if there are zero Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh, it will be very difficult or it will be impossible for them to have military presence in Nagorno-Karabakh, which means to have permanent military presence in Nagorno-Karabakh, they need permanent presence of Armenian population in Nagorno-Karabakh.
Okay.
And again, I am not speaking about status of Nagorno-Karabakh. Permanent presence of Russian troops and permanent presence of Armenian population in Nagorno-Karabakh does not mean that Russia should recognize Nagorno-Karabakh Republic as an independent state. It does not mean that Russia should incorporate Nagorno-Karabakh into Russia as it did with Crimea, but it means that at least Armenians should live in Nagorno-Karabakh. And because Russia understands very well that no Armenians will live in Nagorno-Karabakh under Azerbaijani control, having Azerbaijani passports and having Azerbaijani heads of police or Azerbaijani mayors in towns, it means that to have permanent Armenian population in Nagorno-Karabakh, Russia should do everything to have some territories of Nagorno-Karabakh, which will de jure be part of Azerbaijan, but de facto Azerbaijan will have no control over there. And
Right.
here is a key difference between Russian perception and European perception or Western perception. Because Western perception is that, okay, EU has a lot of experience on ethnic minorities to protect the right of ethnic minorities in different European countries, to allow them to study their language, to have schools in their languages, maybe to have some TV and radio stations on their languages. And EU pretends to believe that, okay, they can convince Azerbaijan and they can help Azerbaijan to create some sort of conditions for Armenians having Azerbaijani passports and living in Azerbaijan. The same conditions as, for example, I don't know, Romanians having Hungary, having Hungarian passports, or Hungarians have in Romania having Romanian passports. But frankly speaking, I'm not sure. Really, you believe on all this? Or they also know that all this is sorry for this word, is bullshit. And also they clearly understand that if Nagorno-Karabakh is declared as a part of Azerbaijan, it means that very quickly they will have zero Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh, but simply they don't care about Nagorno-Karabakh at all, and they don't care, will in Stepanakert live Armenians, Azeris, or I don't know, Chinese. The key strategic goal is to have zero Russian troops in Nagorno-Karabakh, and for zero Russian troops, they need Armenia and Azerbaijan agrees on status of Nagorno-Karabakh as part of Azerbaijan. Of course, this is a little bit speculative question because maybe there are some European officials who really believe that Mr. Aliyev is ready to provide high-level rights to Armenian populations. But frankly speaking, I have doubts because I don't believe that European officials are so stupid.
Sounds very naive, to be honest.
Well, I mean, considering that, maybe off topic, but considering that they put sanctions on themselves from buying Russian oil, I don't know. But anyway, so Benjamin, I just want to ask a point of clarification because we asked you the question of basically big powers competing for, to get credit for the final peace. That was how we framed the question. But I think it seems like what you're saying is Russia is not interested in seeing a finalized peace deal because that will mean Armenia conceding Artsakh as the status of Artsakh within Azerbaijan. Am I right? And if so, why are we seeing Nikol Pashinyan in such a big hurry? It seems like, I'm sorry, two newlyweds Pashinyan and Aliyev trying to sort of sign this peace deal. He has whenever he's in Europe, he's been saying that, yes, it's our priority and we need to quickly sign this. But we didn't hear that emphasis in Moscow when he was meeting with Putin. So where is the actual truth in Russia or in Brussels?
Okay, regarding the Russian position, Russia needs a peace process. I mean, Russia needs delimitation demarcation process. Russia needs negotiations on peace treaty. But let's separate two very distinctive things: negotiations to sign a peace treaty and actual signature of peace treaty. And between these two points, the time frame could be several months, time frame could be several years, time frame could be several decades. For example, Russia and Japan, they did not sign peace treaty almost 78 years after the end of the Second World War. Why Russia needs a process? I mean, the process of delimitation and demarcation, process of peace negotiations, and process of restoration of communications. Because, first and foremost, Russia does not want to have a military clash with Azerbaijan. Because Russia has doubts that the West, first of all, United Kingdom, pushes Azerbaijan to put military pressure on Armenia-Azerbaijan border and on Nagorno-Karabakh, triggering some military backlash from Russia. Because if there will be any military clash between the Russian and Azerbaijani forces, it will immediately complicate or even ruin Azerbaijan-Russia relations, which means strong setback for Russia in South Caucasus. And it will even transform Azerbaijan into another Georgia for Russia, which is absolutely against Russian vital national interest, because Russia wants to have influence in South Caucasus, not only in Armenia.
More than the UK, there's also Turkey, right?
Yeah.
There is also Turkey. So, and second, but also Russia understands that if Azerbaijan behaves itself in an ugly way and putting military pressure on line of contact in Nagorno-Karabakh on Armenia-Azerbaijan border, and if Russia does not answer because it does not want to transform Azerbaijan into another Georgia, and it does not want to have additional problems in its relations with Turkey, but then the Western propaganda will use this to portray Russia as a weak state. And we already hear some analyses that, okay, how Russia can have an ambition to be a great power, or how Russia can have an ambition to have a victory over Ukraine, if Russia is being constantly humiliated by tiny Azerbaijan. I mean, humiliated because Azerbaijan behaves uglier against Russia, ally of Armenia, and Russia is doing nothing. Or Azerbaijan behaves uglier against Russian interests in Nagorno-Karabakh, and we see no Russian answer. So from Russian perspective, if Azerbaijan escalates, Russia has two very bad options. Either to answer militarily and destroy its relations with Azerbaijan and have huge complications with Turkey, or not to answer and being portrayed as a weak state which even is not able to answer tiny Azerbaijan, like international humiliation.
Okay.
To avoid these two equally bad options, Russia wants to facilitate the delimitation and demarcation process, facilitate the negotiations on peace treaty, facilitate the opening of communications to decrease the possibility of Azerbaijani escalation. Because it's one thing if there is no negotiations on anything and Azerbaijan escalates, telling that, sorry guys, but Armenia does not provide me any other options than military escalation. Because look, Armenia rejects to negotiate on peace treaty. Armenia rejects to start process on border delimitation and demarcation. Armenia stops the restoration of communications. So sorry guys, I have no other option than to use military blackmail and military escalation, which, as I mentioned,
it makes sense.
Bad for Russia. But if there is a simultaneously free tracks, Armenia and Azerbaijan negotiate on peace treaty. Armenia and Azerbaijan established joint bilateral commission to think about border delimitation and demarcation, and some activities are being carried out on opening up or restoration of communications. It will be much more difficult for Azerbaijan to escalate or to justify its escalation.
Okay.
That is why Russia is interested on these free tracks, processes on these free tracks. But again, from Russian perspective, it's one thing to negotiate to sign peace treaty, and it's absolutely different thing to sign peace treaty, actually recognizing Nagorno-Karabakh as part of Azerbaijan. So Russia is interested to see some advancement on border delimitation and demarcation. Russia is interested to see advancement in restoration of communications. And Russia is interested to see the start of negotiations on peace treaty. But Russia is not interested to see the peace treaty signed between Armenia and Azerbaijan, on which Armenia recognized Nagorno-Karabakh as part of Azerbaijan. Because again, it will immediately open the way for West to demand the withdrawal of Russian peacekeepers. Otherwise, West will declare, and even Azerbaijan may declare, these Russian peacekeepers as occupational forces, and frame it as another attempt of neo-imperialist Russia occupying territories of another former Soviet republic, along in the same way as the narrative is going about Donetsk People Republic, Lugansk People Republic, Transnistria, South Ossetia, Abkhazia.
All right. Thanks for that detailed explanation, Benjamin. So after Pashinyan returned from Brussels, he made some sensational and I would say pretty offensive statements in the parliament. He began to address some long-time questions and criticism by the opposition with his own, what can I say, alternative narrative. Benjamin, one of those obviously was the comment about lowering the bar, but I'll let you express in your own words what your impression was from the speech in the parliament and then the subsequent messaging from different elements of Pashinyan's team about what he did or he did not say in parliament that day.
Okay, my understanding is that on April 6th, most probably, when Pashinyan was told that the only way to move forward is the first step, Armenia recognizing Nagorno-Karabakh as a part of Azerbaijan and agrees that it will be happy if Nagorno-Karabakh will have some autonomy within Azerbaijan. Pashinyan has agreed to this, or at least Pashinyan said to European counterparts that, okay, I will come to Armenia and I will have a frank discussion with Armenian society, telling them that, okay, we are under pressure, we have to do that. And the speech in parliament was, from my perspective, was a fulfillment of this promise or this task, which Pashinyan took on April 6th, that, okay, guys, I understand. You tell me that Armenia should say that, okay, Karabakh is an Azerbaijan with some autonomy. Okay, I'm going to come back to Armenia and I'm going to try the frank discussion with Armenian society. So what he did in parliament on April 13, I believe this was a gesture towards the West, towards the EU and probably to the United States that, look, guys, you told me that conflict should be solved this way, and I promised you that, okay, I will come and try to sell this to our society. Now I'm trying to sell this to our society. So this is my understanding of this speech.
Yeah, and basically to remind our listeners, in parliament he said that, first of all, he said that since 2016 the issue of the status of Artsakh has always been excluded as an independent entity, which the opposition and even the Russian negotiators rejected and publicly pushed back on. But also he said that the international community has been, I think that he didn't sort of portray it as this is a recent occurrence, but he said the international community has been pressuring Armenia to lower the bar for Artsakh's status. And that could only mean, in my opinion, something less than independence. And then what happened was that this word maximalist kept, it seems like, they're all reading from the same playbook, because Edmond Marukian, who has gotten a special position as a, I think
something like special ambassador
or
ambassador at large.
Yeah, and basically he went to Artsakh, and there was some controversy of him meeting with Artsakh people. But essentially, he went on public TV and said that Armenia's position of independence for Artsakh was maximalist, which implies that we can actually negotiate. I think that a maximalist position would be Shahomyan, Ganzak, River Kur. We're saying, I really don't think that the position of independence for Artsakh is maximalist, but that was sort of what was portrayed. And what was interesting is that after that controversy, which lasted for an entire week, then Pashinyan's team started to walk that back a little bit, saying, well, Pashinyan didn't really say that we should give up on Artsakh independence. He was just portraying what the international community is saying. So did I understand that correctly? And is there any difference even effectively between those two things?
Okay, I believe all understand that if Armenia recognizes Karabakh as part of Azerbaijan with some sort of autonomy, this is a direct path to very quickly have no Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh. I mean, this is obvious for everyone, maybe except some very naive European officials who think that Armenia and Azerbaijan are the same as Luxembourg and Belgium. Again,
Right.
Except maybe these very naive European officials, if they are so naive, of course, but this is another topic of discussion. From everyone else, it's very clear that Karabakh within Azerbaijan means Karabakh with zero or Armenians. So everybody knows that. And here, everything else, it's like a speculation. Okay, let's don't have a maximalist position because, again, if you say that Armenia, that the Karabakh should be part of Azerbaijan under any level of autonomy, you effectively are saying that there should be no Armenians in Karabakh. So if the position that Armenians should live in Karabakh is a maximalism, and non-maximalism is to have zero Armenians in Karabakh, I don't see any logic here.
Can I make a quick insertion, Benyamin?
Yes, of course.
This is, of course, exactly why Artsakh and Armenians in Artsakh have been on the minds of all of the Armenian nation during April 24 and the genocide, right?
Exactly.
We think about our lands in Western Armenia, in Eastern Turkey, completely depopulated from Armenians because of the genocide in 1915. It is on our mind in 2022.
And even look at Shahumyan, look at Ganzak,
or Nakhichevan.
Essentially the plain Nakhichevan.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, it has been continuing. The only thing that the saving grace for us, essentially, to avoid genocide was the holding on to the mountainous part of Artsakh over the last 30 years, which, unfortunately, that point was also like severely sort of degraded with the war. But yeah, so I saw, to accuse the opposition, going back to April 24, to accuse the opposition of trying to politicize the April 24th with the issue of Artsakh is, I think, disingenuous. I think it intrinsically is related to the Armenian genocide, which is continuing to this day.
And also we can look into Hadrut and Shushi. Okay, Azerbaijan occupied these territories approximately 17 or 18 months ago. And if this narrative of Armenians holding Azerbaijani passports and living as happy as, I don't know, Germans living in Switzerland holding Swiss passports, or Hungarians living in Romania holding Romanian passports, if this narrative has even a 0.5% of possibility to be realized, the 18 months after the end of the war was a quite sufficient time for Azerbaijan to bring some Armenians back to Shushi and Hadrut, to give them Azerbaijani passports, and then bring all international media, Armenian expert community, Armenian civil society, international organizations, international peacekeeping organizations, to bring them into Shushi and Hadrut and tell them, look, guys, these are Armenians. They are holding Azerbaijani passports. They are very happy. Here are their Armenian schools, and etc., to organize interview with them and let these Armenians from Shushi and Hadrut say to Armenians in Stepanakert that, look, guys, now we live 10 times better with Azerbaijani passports than we lived 3 years ago with Armenian passports. So we really urge you to drop off your Armenian passports, to drop off your weapons, invite Azerbaijani troops into Stepanakert, meet them with flowers, accept Azerbaijani passports, and you will live happy life. But unfortunately, we don't see zero Armenians in Shushi, zero Armenians in Hadrut, and we all know that we will never see Armenians in Shushi or in Hadrut.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. Do you think Pashinyan should have been more specific in terms of the international community that he cited? Because, for example, Vyacheslav Volodin said that nothing predetermines the possible status of Nagorno-Karabakh. This seems to essentially, just to clarify once again for our audience, it seems that this is the agenda of the West, and the EU, backed by the US, is different, much different than the Russian agenda, which has been sort of repeated over and over, both from the previous negotiator in the OSCE Minsk group and the current one, Vyacheslav Volodin, essentially saying that they don't see the status of Karabakh as being any.
Let me mention that Volodin is the Duma chairman, and he said that when Pashinyan was visiting.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, when Pashinyan was visiting Moscow last week.
Okay, the key difference here is that, as I mentioned, Russian strategic goal is to have permanent military presence in Nagorno-Karabakh. The West, the EU and the United States strategic goal is have no Russian soldiers as the first stage in Nagorno-Karabakh, then in Armenia. But the problem for us is that if we have no Russian soldiers in Nagorno-Karabakh, and if we will have Nagorno-Karabakh as part of Azerbaijan, we will have zero Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh. So from Armenian point of view, this is not the case that, okay, we should like or love Russia, hate West, or love EU, hate Russia, or whatever else. I think every Armenian should have a clear understanding that having Karabakh with zero Armenians, this cannot be in line with Armenia's vital national interest. I will be very much surprised if any Armenian or anyone in the world can logically explain that having zero Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh is in line with vital national Armenian interest. This is not going to happen.
Okay.
So if we don't want to have zero Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh, we should not agree to any autonomous status of Nagorno-Karabakh within Azerbaijan. This is very clear. I mean, does not have anything with current West Russia contradiction, and it's not the issue that, okay, we should support Russia against its struggle against West, or we should support EU and United States against its struggle with Russia. We should support only one thing. Armenians should continue to live in Nagorno-Karabakh.
Right. So speaking of Volodin, Pashinyan was in Moscow this week. It was his first ever official visit to Moscow, and Pashinyan met with President Putin at his Novo-Ogaryovo residence outside of Moscow. They pledged to boost the privileged alliance between, and I'm using that in quotes, the privileged alliance between Russia and Armenia. Benjamin, what is this new term, privileged alliance? What does it mean?
Okay, I'm not sure what does it mean in reality, but if we look into the visit of Pashinyan, if we look it from the perspective of Nagorno-Karabakh, the interesting thing was that in this lengthy statement of 30 points, there was nothing about Armenia-Azerbaijan peace treaty. There was some mentioning about necessity to facilitate the border delimitation and demarcation process. There was an article that, okay, Russia is interested on restoration of communications, and even Russian railway is ready to participate in the reconstruction of a railway along Arax River in Syunik region, which will connect Azerbaijan with Nakhichevan or Azerbaijan with Turkey, but in reality, Russia with Turkey. By the way, that is why Russia is interested in restoration of communications through Syunik, because Russia views it as an alternative land corridor from Russia to Turkey via Azerbaijan and Armenia. And here again, by the way, there are two options, because after entering Nakhichevan via Syunik, this railway can either enter Armenia again and enter Turkey from Gyumri using Gyumri cars, or Turkey and Azerbaijan may construct Kars-Nakhichevan railway, and in that case, Russia-Turkey railway connection will pass only Syunik, and then from Nakhichevan directly will enter Turkey. But this is just as an issue on restoration of communication. But there was nothing about necessity to sign as soon as possible a peace treaty between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which again shows that Russia understands that if peace treaty is going to be signed, definitely in this peace treaty, Nagorno-Karabakh will be declared as part of Azerbaijan, and then this will be used to put pressure on Russia to take out its troops from Nagorno-Karabakh, which Russia is not going to do. In general, I believe a key message of this meeting was that okay, Armenia start delimitation and demarcation process, speed up restoration of communications, start negotiations on peace treaty, but does not sign any peace treaty. At least do not hurry to sign any peace treaty. Do not create complications for us. Do not give legal base for the West to demand withdrawal of Russian peacekeepers.
Okay.
This past week, former Foreign Minister Ayvazyan spoke for the first time in a long time, and he mentioned that even today there are options and possibilities for pro-Armenian outcomes in these negotiations between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Do you have any thoughts about what those possible options would be, Benyamin?
Okay, I mean, now the best case scenario for Armenia, the best case scenario is simply not to recognize Karabakh as part of Azerbaijan. So I don't believe that there are any possibilities that either Azerbaijan or any external power now will recognize Nagorno-Karabakh independence, even within its reduced borders of November 2020. I mean, it's 3,000 square kilometers. And also we have to understand that from economic, political, and even demographic point of view, the current borders of Nagorno-Karabakh make Nagorno-Karabakh non-viable unit, frankly speaking.
Yeah.
So even if someone will recognize Nagorno-Karabakh within its borders of November 2020, this will lead us to nowhere. Armenia. For Nagorno-Karabakh being a viable unit, it should at least have borders of 1988 plus much wider corridor than current 5-kilometer corridor. We all understand that Armenia is absolutely not in a position to change the current status quo, current territorial status quo militarily for at least upcoming 10 years. Even if tomorrow Armenia will start real efforts to modernize its army, I believe we need minimum 10 years to be able at least to think about changing territorial status quo by force.
Mm-hmm.
But to be able to think about this in 10 years, or to be able to modernize our army, to be able to think about this somewhere in 2032 or 2035, we need one basic things. We need keep Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh. Because if there are zero Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh, even if we will have 10 times stronger armies than now, it will be much, much, much difficult to start the military campaign and to take not only Shushi and Hadrut back, but start to taking Lachin bags and Stepanakert back.
Yeah.
This sounds like insane.
So you're saying, like the Russians told us, essentially, told Pashinyan, the most important thing is not to sign a peace deal that basically leaves Karabakh in Azerbaijan.
Yes, at least not to sign this very quickly.
Yeah.
Nobody knows what will happen in 1, 2, or 3 years, especially in this mess in Ukraine, with different options are available. But at least my understanding is that Russia's position is this: not sign peace treaty very quickly, or put it more blatantly, not sign peace treaty until the end of 2022.
Okay. So Hovik mentioned this quote-unquote the privileged alliance. Is this a downgrade from the strategic alliance that we have had with Russia for the last 10 plus years?
Okay, if you look into the maybe legal terms, maybe it can be perceived as a downgrade, because our strategic alliance, at least, was officially declared in August 1997, when the first president of Armenia, Levon Ter-Petrosyan, signed this treaty on friendship and mutual defense in Moscow.
Mm-hmm.
So from legal point of view, maybe you can say, okay, strategic alliance, privileged alliance is something like a downgrade. Okay, I'm not a real expert on these diplomatic or legal terms, but what can I say? That from my perspective, if Armenia has two options, either to sign peace treaty with Azerbaijan, recognize Nagorno-Karabakh as part of Azerbaijan and have zero Armenians in Karabakh, or not to sign peace treaty with Azerbaijan and have some Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh, my understanding is that the second option is only acceptable one.
Benyamin, going back to the 30-point document that we saw signed, or the declaration, any other important takeaways? There was a point about biolabs, and it seems like Armenia and Russia are now fully on the same page regarding those biolabs, which probably to me sounded different than before. And does this mean basically that Armenia is going to relinquish its projects that it was doing with US under US funding with biolabs? And also the pro-Western elements in Armenia and previously supporters of Pashinyan, started criticizing Pashinyan this week related to this 30-point declaration, specifically around sanctions evasion, basically saying that there was some language around potential of Armenia, helping Russia evade sanctions. Not explicitly, but what was the? Can you go into more detail about that as well?
Okay, there was an article that both Armenia and Russia are concerned by unilateral actions in economic sphere, which was veiled mentioning of US, EU, Canada, and other US allies unilateral sanctions on Russia, because no sanctions have been enforced through UN Security Council. So all these are unilateral or multilateral sanctions. But frankly speaking, I'm surprised hearing that some people are surprised. So if anyone anticipated that Pashinyan will meet Mr. Putin and will state that, okay, Mr. Putin, you are as bad guy as Hitler, current Russia is a Nazi Germany, and current Russia should be destroyed as Nazi Germany was destroyed. Okay, if anyone anticipated Mr. Pashinyan to tell something in Novo Ogaryovo, and then he is surprised or disappointed, okay, I have no comment on this.
Yeah, there was also a point about coordinating positions on international issues, which I sort of I interpret as voting together more in UN and other
Regarding the
fora.
voting, by the way, Armenia is trying to keep neutrality because in last several votes in UN General Assembly, especially the vote according to which Russia was kicked out from the UN Human Rights Council, Armenia was the only CSTO in the Eurasian Economic Union member state which did not participate in the voting. All other CSTO or Eurasian Economic Union member state voting against this or voting for Russia.
Yeah.
So in this case, I believe
So it wasn't even
Armenia doing
it wasn't
the
even
most.
abstention.
Armenia is doing the most, not to somehow to also keep the channels with the West, which of course is the right thing. But again, to anticipate or to criticize Pashinyan, why you did not said Mr. Putin that he is another Hitler and he should be arrested and put into the Hague. So it's nonsense. It's something like to accept that, for example, tomorrow, I don't know, Georgian Prime Minister will go to the United States, will meet with President Biden and will say that United States, starting from 1991, violated international law many times, that United States troops killed more than 1 million innocent civilians in Iraq, Yemen, and other parts of wars, that the United States government should be put into the Hague. And at the end of the day, says that Mr. Biden has serious mental issues and he cannot govern the United States. I believe no one anticipates that, for example, Georgian, not even Georgian, because Georgia is not a NATO member. Anyone anticipate that, for example, the Polish president or Romanian president will go meet Mr. Biden and say that, okay, United States is responsible for killing more than 1 million civilians? Well, I don't think that anyone anticipates this.
Okay, on a related matter, a lot of pro-Western supporters of Pashinyan were also lamenting this visit as and the declaration as a step closer to a union state or Belarusization of Armenia. Did you see any evidence of that in the statement?
I don't see any evidence of that in the statement, and I don't believe that as far as current mess continues in Ukraine, there will be any actions by Russia either to push forward this union state, I mean to increase the numbers of union states except Russia, Belarus, or even to trigger some deeper integration with within Eurasian Economic Union. At least as far as active military phase is going on Ukraine, because as far as I understand.
Why is that?
Okay, because first of all focus of Russia is on Ukraine, and second, now no one will agree on this because this is a very sensitive issue, and even people are trying to understand how this active phase of military activities in Ukraine will end, and then every country, even Armenia or Kazakhstan or Kyrgyzstan, will decide: is it worthy to have deeper integration with Russia or no?
Okay.
And I don't think that Russia is interested to put additional pressure or create more complication with its allies, or at least with its partners, by asking them, okay, let's deepen our integration within Eurasian Economic Union, or please join Russia-Belarus Union State, because no one knows what will be the reaction and will create some complications for Russia in post-Soviet space. And the war in Ukraine is a quite big complication for Russia to add anything else. Okay. So at least this is not going to happen, at least until the end of active phase of military activities. Why I am telling the active phase? Because my understanding is that this mess in Ukraine will continue for years and we will see some cycles. Active phase, then some passive phase, some low intensity conflict, more like subversive actions or guerrilla warfare by Ukraine. And not only in the Ukrainian territories controlled by Russia, but theoretically also in territory of Russia
inside
itself,
Russia.
Not only in Crimea, but in the border areas of Russia. Then Russia will apply these counter-insurgency or counter-terrorism activities, which he realized in northern Caucasus. Then after some period, we will see again another active phase of activities, and this may take years, if not decades.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you for your thoughts about the Ukraine crisis as a finishing thought, but since you are talking about it, Benyamin, let's do that right now. How do you think that the special operations that the Kremlin has been talking about is going in the Ukraine, the war?
Okay, my understanding is that Russia has a little bit other expectations. As far as I understand, there were some preliminary deals or secret agreements with local elites in some parts of Ukraine, starting from Chernihiv and ending with Kharkiv, ending with Kherson, to not to organize a resistance and simply switch the sides. But this happened, or these deals or preliminary agreements have been realized only in Kherson and Zaporozhye regions. And we see that Russia relatively easily invaded or took the city of Kherson, city of Melitopol, city of Berdyansk. And Russia hoped and had some preliminary discussions or even agreements that something similar should happen in Kharkiv, in Chernihiv, in Mariupol. But we see that these didn't happen. Why this didn't happen? I'm not in a position to comment and don't want to speculate. But at the end of the day, because this process or the Russian plans have been partly failed or have been successful only partly, now the military operation has the second phase. And again, there is a less clarity. What does the second phase mean? Some argue that second phase mean to liberate entire Donbass, Donetsk and Lugansk regions, and to keep part of Kherson and Zaporozhye regions. This is one option. Another option is that the second phase or the active phase of military activities will end only when Russia will not only take the Donbass, but also will take Dnipropetrovsk region, will take Odessa region, and will make Ukraine a landlocked country. So all these are speculations. But at the end of the day, Russia hoped that within 1 week, it will easily took also Chernihiv, Kharkiv, and Mariupol, the same way as Russia took Kherson, Melitopol, and Berdyansk.
All right. Hovik, I wanted to talk a little bit about the protest movement rising in Yerevan. About a week ago, I think Artur Vanessian started a daily sit-in. I think you've been present at that event for at least a couple of times. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on in Yerevan?
Yeah, so I think that basically the opposition is starting a decentralized effort to essentially rekindle and consolidate protests against Pashinyan, and I believe the specific messaging is around Pashinyan's policy on Artsakh. As you mentioned last week, the whole week there was a hunger strike, and by two former participants in the Artsakh war, and High Party, led by Artur Vanessian, was conducting a sit-in in the at the Opera Square, or what is called the Freedom Square. And this week, just as I said, after April 24th, they waited until the April 24th passed. It seems like the ARF, Reborn Armenia, the Republican Party of Armenia are all sort of now coordinating in this decentralized effort. For instance, there's going to be, today was a informational march to sort of spread the word, and people marched about 1,000 people, I think, or 2,000. I'm not an expert on crowd sizes, but they marched through Yerevan, and the marches within Yerevan, these protests are going to continue. Well, at the same time, I believe through 4 different symbolic points in Armenia, one of them being Ijevan, there are specific opposition groups that are marching down. For instance, Aspram Kirpeyan is marching from Ijevan with a team of people, and they're all going to congregate in Yerevan towards the end of the week. So I expect that the protests will pick up towards the end of the week, and many in the opposition, I think, see this as a last chance in earnest to remove Pashinyan or force him to essentially give up his disastrous policy on Artsakh, which I don't know if it can be possible without resignation.
Hovik, what is the end goal? Is it just an end to the policies or regime change?
I think those both are synonymous at this point. I don't think that you can affect change of Pashinyan's policies without getting rid of the entire team. The sort of, taking away the journalist hat, yes, I'm sort of very much in agreement with that point of view. But there are a lot of questions that people ask, right? Okay, what happens next? How are you going to remove Pashinyan? But even if you do, what are the next steps? And so far, the opposition, while claiming to have a full roadmap to getting Pashinyan out and saving Armenia, that has not, been disclosed yet. And that's my question. Let's say we get rid of Pashinyan, or Armenia gets rid of Pashinyan, what's going to happen?
What about other towns, for example, where for the last year and a half since the elections, in June 21 especially, the mayors have been shackled and have been harassed? And you mentioned Ijevan, but what about Vanadzor and Goris as examples? Is there any kind of a movement in those places?
I think that the opposition has not fully disclosed, all the different things they're doing and all the, and I think that's also tactical move because they don't want to sort of give up
I
their
see.
hands to the government. My own opinion, and maybe Benjamin will disagree, but I think that all politics is decided in Yerevan. If you get 100,000 people in Yerevan, then you would have regime change, or I don't know what that number is. Maybe it's 200,000, but I really think that the regions of Armenia matter less and less. But I think it's good. It's good for them to have these regional marches too, I think.
I fully agree with Hovik. First of all, even according to official data, 38% of population of Armenia, but according to non-official data, this is no less than 40 or even 45%, which unfortunately means that after 1991, we not established or constructed a state, we established or constructed a city, unfortunately for us, but this
Yes,
is another issue.
unfortunately.
This is a really city. And regarding the mass protests, I sincerely hope, and maybe here I am too naive, but I sincerely hope that our government will be smart enough to use this quite large and intensifying protest movement to send a clear message to the Western partners that, look, guys, we really tried to convey your messages or your dreams or whatever else. But look, this is not going to happen. So if we will continue to push forward this, at the end of the day, we are going to be replaced. And don't hope that the guys who theoretically can come and replace us will be more pro-Western or at least Western neutral.
Okay. All right. That brings us to the end of our topics. I wanted to ask each of you if you have something that you want to get off your chest this week. Benjamin, do you have any topics that you want to talk about?
Not so much, but again, I would like to emphasize that also it should be very clear, and also this should be transmitted to all our international partners, through different channels. I don't know, journalists, expert community, diplomats, that yes, maybe there are a lot of successful models of ethnic minorities living in countries, at least in the European Union, and maybe not in the European Union, maybe in other countries, I don't know, United States, Canada, or whatever else. But unfortunately, the South Caucasus and especially Azerbaijan are far away from these models and these realities. And the South Caucasus and Azerbaijan is going to be far away from these realities for decades to come. So if anyone is really believes that, okay, why Armenians cannot hold Azerbaijani passports and live happily like the way, like, I don't know, Poles have UK passport and live in United Kingdom or something like that, it should be very clearly, this message should be disseminated to all our international partners using all available channels. Media should do its work, expert community should do its work using its networks. This clear message should be disseminated that Nagorno-Karabakh within Azerbaijan, under any guarantees, US guarantees, I don't know, EU guarantees, President Aliyev guarantees, joint guarantees, Karabakh as an autonomy within Azerbaijan means Karabakh with zero Armenians. So please at least understand that if you pursue this goal, Karabakh is an autonomy within Azerbaijan, it means that you pursue the goal of zero Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh. Don't pretend or don't give you hope or don't make your conscience a little bit calm, telling that no, we simply want to make life of Armenians happy. We want Armenians in Karabakh live happy life, holding Azerbaijani passports, much better lives than now. This is not going to happen.
Thank you, Benjamin. And just to add one more thing to that, it is asking Nagorno-Karabakh to live in a Turkic country which has committed the genocide on Armenians and has not recognized, let alone repaired it.
Yeah.
Hovik, your rant?
Well, my rant. I was thinking what I should talk about, and I don't think I've talked about Pashinyan in a while. So my rant is about Pashinyan. Last week, he made a speech in our Armenian parliament. What I title his mea culpa, and basically he said that, as I said, after 2016, he said Artsakh status could not have been outside of Azerbaijan or independent, despite the fact that for Popov, for instance, Russia's OSCE Minsk Group co-chair, explicitly sort of rejected that and said that actually, yes, the status was an independent status was a possibility. But this fake mea culpa, basically, speech, where he confessed that he should have told the Armenian people about this instead of hiding it. And that was his chief guilt. He also said that he's guilty not because he handed off lands, but because he didn't hand them off early enough. Essentially, he said that, that war was avoidable, but then it would end in the same situation, and then casually said, minus the human lives lost. I mean, I just don't know what to say about that kind of a statement. Basically, if he knew that the status was going to be the same, if he knew that he was going to have a war and he could have saved those human lives and had the same status, why didn't he do that? And he talks about it so nonchalantly that I don't know what to say. And that in that speech, he also said that he is guilty, that because he should have told our army that it didn't have the capacity that it had, and essentially, like, he lied to the Armenian people about the capacity of the army. And this is despite the fact that he trusted the leadership of the army without making any major changes for 2 years. This is despite the fact that for 2 years, we've been hearing about underwear and strawberries in the army and how good life was in the army. This is despite the fact that the military procurement plan was changed from purchasing Tor and other air defense systems to these Su-30 aircraft that didn't have any missiles. This is all despite the fact that Nikol and Arayik Harutyunyan were proclaiming that the skies over Stepanakert were never as secure as they were today. And some things in his mea culpa speech were missing. For instance, the fact that he did not accept the continuity of the negotiations process. And he said that he's starting the negotiations process from his own point. Another point that was missing was that he didn't accept the Madrid principles, saying that the West still has to justify what they mean, as if he didn't understand that. Knowing all of this, he announced that Artsakh is Armenia, period, giving Azerbaijan a basis in their own mind for initiating military hostilities. He stopped mobilization on the third day, despite the fact that he claims that he knew that our army was not strong enough to fight the war. This is despite the fact that he was sending his wife to do photo ops in bunkers while men were dying every single day of the war in troves. And I mean that with all utmost respect. So, this was a ridiculous, humiliating speech and continues to cause injury to the Armenian people 2 years after the war when they hear things like this.
Okay. Thank you, Hovik. I don't have my own rant, but since you took this topic, I'm just going to add one more thing from that very speech that Pashinyan made. He said, a few things have changed politically and military politically. Azerbaijan got 7 regions and a part of Nagorno-Karabakh. Russian peacekeepers were deployed in Artsakh. All other things considered, absolutely everything remained the same. This really, really galled me the most. Did he forget that he left 5,000 Armenians dead, more than twice as many injured, and a couple of hundred POWs who are still in Azerbaijani jails every day after a year and a half of the war? And he has the nerve to say absolutely everything else remains the same. Okay, maybe we'll consider that my rant. All right. Yeah. Thank you, Benyamin, very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Asbed and Hovik, for having me. It's a pleasure as always.
Okay, that was our Week in Review show, and we hope it helped you catch up with some of the issues in and around Armenia from this past week. As always, we invite your feedback and your suggestions. You can find us on most social media and podcast platforms or our website, groong.org. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel on YouTube, like our pages, and follow us on social media. On behalf of everyone in this episode, we wish you a good week. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.